I joined the army in France when I was 18. I didn't really know what I wanted in life. I figured this would at least give me a routine, and if I'm honest, my parents kind of pushed for it. I think my parents were just sick of me lounging around and being a leech. I would basically sit in my room and not do shit all day, so they wanted me to actually make a life for myself. This would at least provide me with pay, food, a place to sleep, and something to do. By the mid-90s, I'd been through a few deployments. These deployments were mostly peacekeeping and training rotations around Europe. It was nothing glamorous and mostly just guarding sites, patrolling, and making sure conflicts did not flare up again. I wouldn't say I was really tasked with anything super important. I think I felt like a cardboard cutout a lot of the time, just a guy to make up the numbers. I will admit that I'm not the smartest guy in the world, so I guess they recognized that pretty quickly. Probably decided that standing still and not shooting myself was a big enough ask. This changed though, and I started being rotated for more advanced training. I felt like I was finally about to get my big break, and the last thing that I wanted to do was squander it. In 1996, I was selected for a NATO exercise in Poland. It was one of those full-scale field training exercise things. It would be multinational units, so probably a few hundred soldiers from different countries working together to practice joint operations. We had Americans, Brits, Italians, and a handful of other small contingents. I'm not sure exactly how they decided who they would pick. I think there was definitely a mix of proficiency levels because some of the soldiers on this FTX had seen some actual action. The goal of the FTX was pretty simple. We were to run a series of coordinated missions in a mock village that was set up just for training. I think it had been a real village in the past, but once it was abandoned a few years ago, I guess NATO claimed it for themselves. It meant they didn't have to waste money and manpower on erecting structures and could at the same time provide a more immersive experience. It would have obviously have been swept and things sorted out long before we got there. This FTX would involve hostage recovery, building clearance, comms drills, and recon. This was all to be carried out under simulated blackout and fog conditions. They wanted to see how units from different countries could work together under stress. We were briefed on the area, told about the layout of the village, the types of buildings, and the hostage scenarios. We were also given a few tools and a rough sketched out map of the area with key points. It was sketched out faintly in pencil on the shittiest paper known to man. Everything had been planned out in advance. We had rules of engagement, radio checks and fallback procedures that we had to follow. It was standard NATO stuff that we would be scored on, and we would be evaluated on different factors. At that point, I thought it would just be another night exercise, but looking back, that was the calm before everything went wrong. The FTX itself was supposed to be routine. Fog had rolled in that evening. It was low enough to cover the trees, but thick enough to make every shadow twitch in the corner of your eye. We were in blackout conditions. We would have radio checks every few minutes up until the FTX started and the simulated comms blackout would start. We would also have squads splitting off and moving silently toward their specific objectives. My team's assignment was simple on paper. We were to recover a hostage from one of the buildings, make sure everyone stayed in formation, and follow procedure and report back. The village itself just looked normal at first. There were a few houses, some sheds, and a few empty shops. Almost immediately, I started noticing little things that did not make sense. I spotted some tracks in the mud leading up to the village. They were massive ones, much bigger than any boot I had ever seen. They could not have been tracked in by any of the setup team, and I mean, what kind of animal has boot-like feet? They stretched past the outskirts of the village and disappeared into the forest. I would catch sight of some of them actually in the village too, around the backs of houses and just in places that did not make sense. I mentioned it quietly to the guys near me when I first noticed, and they shrugged it off. They told me it was probably just nerves, making me jump to conclusions. We were all tired, and our eyes had to adjust to the dark. That combined with the adrenaline pumping, and I guess I just accepted that maybe I was not thinking straight. Still though, I know what I saw. And then there were the spent rounds. We found small caliber cartridges scattered near a shed. Now, the briefing had not mentioned a single round being fired. they didn't tell us shit about any tracers or training rounds. These weren't those anyway. They were just little metal casings catching the faint light of our flashlights. We didn't know if they'd been left from a previous exercise or if someone had snuck in, but it put me on edge. Maybe they added them without telling us, just to immerse us more. At one point, I swear I saw a figure moving along the tree line behind one of the buildings, and then another, maybe 2 or 3. Just shadows at first, but moving fast and disappearing behind trees or across rooftops. Everyone else seemed to see them too, but we all chalked it up to paranoia. Fog makes your eyes play tricks at night. Nerves make you imagine shapes where there are none. We were psyching ourselves out before our mission even started, and we would not cut it like this. I tried to focus on the mission. We just had to focus on the hostage we were supposed to locate and ignore it. We pressed on, checking each building methodically, like the plan instructed. Then came something else. Shoved up against a wall, we found a small folded uniform. It was old and shredded, with rusty buttons and torn up fabric. It smelled faintly of rot, and I almost puked when I caught a whiff. Nothing on the briefing said anyone left clothes behind, and nobody knew where it came from. There were faint streaks of dried blood leading from the uniform across the dirt floor. It was old blood, certainly not fresh, but enough to make me pause. My stomach turned. This just felt wrong. I guess maybe they were really going the extra mile for this FTX. By the time we entered the next building, tension was thick. We moved in slowly, covering each other methodically and scanning rooms for our hostage. We only had a rough idea of where the guy was, and we had orders to sweep every last building in a certain order. One of the guys kicked at the floorboards, checking for traps. Another guy swung his flashlight along the walls. My ears were straining for anything out of place, and fully expecting more surprises to have been left behind. That's when we found this weird-ass fucking hatch. It was hidden on the lowest floor in the second to last building, and was not on the rough sketch that we were given. It wasn't mentioned as part of the exercise. We figured that maybe this was the jackpot. I just want to mention, the hostage is a fellow NATO soldier. Just some asshat who got volunteered against his will by command as more of a punishment than anything. I know my sarge had a lot of fun tying him up with rope and making sure he had no way to move, Lama. Anyway, so it's this small cellar door just tucked into the corner of the building that's barely noticeable. Some of the squad thought it might be storage, but the hair on my neck stood up. I thought this was the goal, and that the last building on the plan was just to make us let our guard down. I dropped down after opening it, and the air hit me first. It was musty and damp, like it had not been disturbed for years. My flashlight cut through the dark, but at first, all I saw was shadow. A couple of our squad mates dropped down with me, while the others stood guard at strategic positions above and swept upstairs simultaneously. Then I noticed shapes, stacked along the walls, the corners, the floor. There were fucking bodies, but dozens of them, maybe more. This was not our fucking hostage. They were partially rotted, it looked like, with clothes shredded, similar to what we had seen outside. Their flesh was discolored, and some of it was hanging off like stringy cheese. I froze. Every building had been cleared by another unit weeks ago. Every single one. This was not supposed to be here. This did not seem like a part of the training. The guys down with me laughed nervously and tried to joke it off. They're testing how we react to surprises, but I knew better. The look and the smell of death is unmistakable. These were not staged props. Something about the way they were positioned, the smell of air, it made my chest tighten. I motioned for the guys to stay quiet. We barely whispered as we shined our flashlights closer, sweeping over the first row of bodies. The first thing that hit me about these bodies was the eyes. They were wide open and staring straight up at the ceiling. Then all of a sudden, I noticed that one of the bodies was moving slightly. A man laying half on his side, chest rising and falling. It was like there was shallow breathing, but that could not be possible with the condition that the body was in. My stomach dropped. One of the younger guys near me gasped and stepped back, and knocked over something metal that made a large sound. I turned just in time to see the body's eyes snap fully open. They were just black and blank. Before I could even shout a warning, the body jerked violently. It started swinging itself upright and lunging toward us. Chaos just hit the room. My squad went from careful clearing to screaming and panicked firing. There was flash after flash of white light as our weapons lit up the room. We were all trained soldiers, but in that moment, it was like we were civvies again, with how we disregarded all protocol. My hands were shaking. Shots were being fired without careful aim and without being in proper formation. Other squad mates had abandoned their posts and dropped down, only to be met with bullets ricocheting off walls and us going crazy. The bodies did not stop moving. More of them started stirring and dragging themselves up off of the floor. They were moving faster than I've ever seen any human move. My ears rang from the gunfire. Comms were fucking dead too, due to the simulated blackout, so we could not even inform command of what was happening. One of the guys got hit in the arm by another soldier's bullet, ricocheting in the panic. Fucking dumbasses were just shooting blindly and missing everything. I gritted my teeth and ordered a retreat. We had to fucking stop them from climbing out. These things, whatever the fuck they were, had so much strength, it was hard to keep pushing them back. The bullets were not putting them down, at least not for long. I swear, I unloaded enough bullets into the head of one of these bodies to kill his descendants, but after a few minutes, they would get back up. One of them grabbed onto me, while the other soldiers were climbing up the ladder, and it was like a vice grip on me. I thought I was done for. It took all of my strength just to hold this fucker away from me, and the others were closing in. A few bullets from the top of the ladder managed to disrupt them enough and give me enough leverage to shove it away. One tiny slip though, and those idiots would have put a bullet in my head. Sweat and fear made my grip slip on the ladder at least twice. The ladder creaked under weight, and one of the guys was screaming something about it breaking. Somehow, I managed to pull myself up eventually. It took so fucking long because we had to drag the wounded up with us. 2 idiots had been hit by stray fire. I slammed the hatch shut and pressed against it. I could feel the vibrations as dozens of hands and bodies slammed against the wood. They wanted out. God, they wanted out. My hands were shaking and my chest burned, but the hatch held, and we managed to seal it shut. For a few seconds, the only sound was our own panic breathing. We had to move. The wounded were bleeding and panicking, even though the wounds thankfully were not that serious. We dragged them back to the mission vehicle as fast as we could. Every step I took, I kept my eyes on the tree line, half expecting those shadows to be moving there again. We had no choice but to finish the FTX. Comms were obviously still dead due to blackout, and we would be ripped a new one heading back like this without finishing. Protocols just went out the window. We skipped the slow, cautious search and went straight to the location where we knew the hostage was supposed to be. It was the fastest and most careless sweep we had ever done. Everyone was on edge, glancing at every shadow, every tree, every corner, and forcing themselves to act normal. But when we got there, he was not there. There was no sign of anything, not of equipment or tracks or boots or any clue at all. It was just fucking empty. If this was another trick or obstacle, I was going to lose my fucking shit. I checked every corner, even places that were not part of the exercise. I could not find anything, and we were all fed up. We took the vehicle back to base and were silent, except for the moaning of the guys who got lit up. Reporting what happened was like walking into a buzzsaw. The higher-ups chewed us out for hours. They called us idiots, blamed the friendly fire, and said that we'd screwed up basic procedures. I kept my mouth shut and tried to answer questions without revealing how badly we'd freaked out in the cellar. No one asked about the hatch, no one even hinted at it. Command were so fucking pissed that most of them went down to the FTX site personally. That's how you know you're in deep fucking shit. When they came back, I tried to bring it up to a captain when I realized they were not going to ask us about that section of the FTX. What about the storage space? I asked. He froze and then just snapped. Shut the fuck up, soldier, or I will send you to Kingdom Come personally. That was it. They never found the hostage from what we found out. They never found a trace of him. They could not find clothes or gear or even a scrap of evidence. It was like he'd never existed. He was initially marked as missing, but then it was written up as desertion after an investigation, which obviously does not make sense. Who the fuck deserts in the middle of an FTX in a random country, miles from home, with no feasible way to get anywhere safe? Not to mention, we know full well he was tied up tight. Unless he was Houdini incarnate, that fucker had no chance of making it out. Back in 1998, I was a soldier with NATO, in Portuguese, and joined the army when I was just 17. At the time, I was part of a training rotation in Romania. NATO had set up this massive forest exercise for us that would be simulating convoy movement and rapid response in dense terrain. We were supposed to move armored vehicles along mapped routes, maintain radio comms, react to simulated ambushes, and generally, just see how well we could operate in forested terrain at night together. Our convoy was small. It consisted of 4 armored trucks and a command vehicle. I was riding in one of the middle trucks with a couple of other soldiers from my unit. The forest was thick with old growth and was almost impenetrable in places. You could barely see 10 meters ahead even in the day, and at night it was a blur of black shapes and fog. We left the staging area in the late afternoon, moving slowly. Radios were checked every 10 minutes. Everything was normal. The instructors reminded us to stick to the plan, report any issues, and keep formations tight. It was pretty straightforward. By the time we hit the first dense patch of forest, the fog rolled in. It wasn't the kind you see in the movies. It was thick and wet and almost solid, and hanging low to the ground and clinging to the trees. It made the convoy feel like it was moving for smoke. Visibility dropped to a few meters, and I started noticing things that I could not explain. I saw shadows flitting at the edges of my vision. I also saw a tree trunk that looked like it moved when I blinked. I laughed it off at first, and played it off as nerves and exhaustion. Everything was going smoothly until the second checkpoint. One of the trucks, the third in the convoy, stopped answering radio calls. We tried every frequency, every channel, but there was nothing. There was nothing from them at all. The fog made visibility almost zero, so we could not see if they had pulled over or were just out of sight. The driver in the front called back and said, "Check the route markers. Make sure we did not miss a turn in the fog." We did not miss any turn. The route was correct. It was impossible to be out of position, yet they weren't answering. I told myself it was a mechanical issue, like maybe a stalled engine, but something felt wrong. We slowed down, keeping the remaining vehicles tight. I checked my mirrors constantly, ears straining for the sound of the missing truck's engine. And then I heard something like knocking or tapping. It was super faint, but I could hear it right against the side of our vehicle. I looked out the small window, but could not see anything but the fog and black shapes of the trees. The others noticed it too, but none of us said anything to each other about it. It could have been branches or been the wind, I suppose. The thing is though, it seemed like someone was knocking in a pattern, like a specific pattern to catch your attention. Even though it was faint, it was done with too much force to just have been branches though. That night, the forest in the dark started playing tricks on my brain. I would see shadows darting between trees, just at the edge of my vision. I would think it was a deer or a stray dog, then blink, and then there's nothing. Tracks would appear along the path, big ones, too large for boots, and not matching our vehicles or any of our guys. We decided to leave 2 vehicles behind to maintain our position, and sent a small team with me included to search for the missing truck. We followed the trail as best as we could, keeping lights low and scanning constantly. That's when we stumbled upon this weird little village. I swear, we did not even know it existed until we saw it. It was pretty small and only had a few abandoned houses. There were 1 or 2 broken vehicles laying around too. There was some military gear scattered around and some old ammo crates rotting. The place smelled of damp wood and iron. It was old enough to have been abandoned decades before. The village freaked us out immediately. There were trucks with doors hanging open, with tires sunken into the dirt. There were military markings on these vehicles that were faded and peeling off. Some of the houses had collapsed roofs and smashed windows, but nothing had been touched recently. There were no signs of people living here, and no tracks besides our own. My gut was screaming that we were in the wrong place, but the missing truck had to be somewhere. We split up to check the village carefully. I went with 2 others to quickly scan some houses. That's when the sounds started up again. Low tapping against the sides of the fucking vehicles. We just ignored it and carried on searching. Eventually, we found the missing truck. It was farther along the forest road than it should have been. It was actually miles ahead of where it could have logically traveled. Even with the engines running full tilt, it should not have been possible. It was just parked up, but there didn't seem to be anything wrong with it. The driver and the 2 soldiers inside looked like they'd been in shock. They didn't even respond at first when they saw us. They just had this blank stare that took a second to snap them out of. When they finally spoke to us, it was in fragmented sentences. They said the forest shifted, that they thought they were following the route, then suddenly, they were somewhere else entirely, that shadows were moving just beyond the lights, keeping pace and were sometimes right on top of the vehicles. Then they told us that the tapping that we heard on the side of our vehicles was following them for miles and did not go away, even once. They had no idea how long they'd been gone, and the GPS was useless and was not giving accurate readings. They said at one point, they just found themselves pulled over. Like, 1 second they were driving, trying to figure out what the fuck was going on, and then the next, boom. We were knocking and asking them what happened. We did not have any more time to waste playing around, and had to get the convoy back to base fast. The fog still did not let up. We kept seeing those shadows moving around the whole way back. Every time we slowed even slightly to turn or maneuver, there was a rap or a tap against the metal. It was really loud when we were initially leaving from near the village, and made us jump and shit ourselves every time. As we got closer to base, it grew quieter until it stopped. When we got back, nobody believed the story, and we got chewed out for taking diversions and slowing down. They did not care about anything except the convoy being late. Even years later, I can remember it all perfectly. I don't know what the fuck was going on out there, and honestly, I don't think I want to know. But seriously, how the fuck did that other vehicle end up so far ahead? Hey, hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment because it lets YouTube know you like the content and helps more people to see these videos. My next big goal for the channel is 100,000 subscribers, and as a celebration, I will be doing a Q&A video once we hit that goal. Thank you, and back to the stories. Back in the mid-2000s, I was stationed in Afghanistan with a NATO task force. I ended up here and embedded with a joint NATO-US unit in the south, near Kandahar province. We were supposed to help stabilize the area and work alongside American units to keep the peace. Nothing could ever really prepare me for what I ran into. It started with a tip from our intel guy. A local had reported that some American soldiers were running solo operations off the books, but not the type that you'd think. These were dirty ops. The motivation behind this kind of shit is iffy. Could be for power, could be for extra cash on the side, or just for sick kicks. We got told that these fuckers were kidnapping people, torturing them, and selling information onto our enemies. I will spare the specific details, but he told us a lot of shit. I will be candid here. Nobody really believed the locals at first, and that's simply because we hear rumors all the time. Not always as severe as this, but we do. Information supply lines get muddied, and things get leaked on purpose to fuck up our ops and keep us guessing. The thing about this, though, is that the details were specific. I'm talking names, accurate descriptions of soldiers, exact locations down to a T, and movements too. The unit was supposed to be NATO-friendly oversight, so we were tasked to check it out quietly. My squad, which was 4 guys plus me, got the green light to investigate. Officially, we were verifying unusual activity near an abandoned compound about 10 clicks outside Kandahar. We were off the map basically. We had no direct comms with base while we were out there. Discretion was emphasized more than anything. If this kind of shit gets out, it's nothing but bad news. We rolled out in a pair of armored Humvees. The compound we rolled up to looked like it had been deserted years ago. There were rusting vehicles out front, I guess to give it cover. Nothing seemed out of place at first, but the smell hit us before we even got close. Smelled like shit. Dead shit. We moved in slow and started clearing perimeter buildings. We very quickly picked up signs that some fuckers have been here, and recently too. We spotted clear boot prints in the sand. They even left some cigarette butts out front. Very sloppy work. Not only that, but there were bloodstains in the sand around the back of the compound. Very, very faint, but they were 100% there. Our gut told us that this was probably legit intel. We split up to sweep the compound. I was on the east side, crawling through a collapsed storage shed. I quickly stumbled upon a small room with chains hanging from the walls. There were bones in there that were not fresh but recent enough. Traces of faint dry blood in there as well as some broken gear. I didn't even get a fucking chance to signal anyone when the shooting started. It was coming from the second floor of one of the main buildings. I guess those fuckers had been waiting for us. My stomach sank, and my mind immediately jumped to this being a setup. These guys were heavily armed. They didn't even hesitate, just straight up opened fire. I barely got behind cover. It was pure chaos. Sand was kicked up from the impact of the bullets, which impacted our vision. I was stupidly split up from my squad, and they were just trying to coordinate while dodging fire. Local comms were patchy, and we had no contact with higher-ups. It was just us against them in this broken compound. I tried to flank them while my squad was under heavy fire. I stumbled upon this one lone guy. Looked like he was babysitting someone they had rounded up. It was just some local village guy tied up in a back room. The American guy was just laughing and beating the shit out of this guy while he screamed for help. His head looked like it had been shaved in patches, and he had scars all over his body. What looked like fucking brands from something hot too. He raised his pistol against the man, and I wanted to help him with all of my might, but I did not have enough information. If I shot this guy like this, it could scupper any of our chances to get out of here. He just smiled and shot a round into his foot and walked off as the guy just bled. My guys had started to make headway, and I felt pretty fucking useless. I managed to see enough of the building and popped that evil fucker when I got the chance. I managed to link back up with the rest as we swept the rest of the compound. We had to clear it before we could tend to anyone. One of our guys got hit out of nowhere while sweeping. Bullet went straight through his shoulder, and he went down screaming like a sack of potatoes. We dragged him behind cover and tried to patch him up while keeping our heads down. We were lucky that these sick fucks were reckless and like they almost wanted to die, like they had nothing to lose. Even with a tactical advantage in knowing the layout, they sometimes just threw themselves at us. We eventually cornered two of them in a collapsed garage. That's when the real horror hit. They'd rigged a small room of cages, some still containing terrified locals. Men, women, even a kid no older than 10. One of the Americans in the garage started laughing again and waving his gun at the cages. I shot him in the leg to try and subdue him. Chaos erupted again, with bullets flying everywhere and the others firing back with screams everywhere. We managed to neutralize two of the rogue soldiers. The others disappeared during the melee. We rescued the locals as best as we could, patched up the wounded, and tried to call it in. Base comms were dead for a while, but we finally got through. We did only the things we could, which was bandage the worst wounds, improvise slings, and make people lie down and breathe. Time crawled until the choppers. We watched them pull our guy and a couple of civilians out. The rest, the ones who were too scared to move or too injured to fly, we loaded into a Humvee and moved out. Back at the base, the debrief was a mess. We told the who, what, where in as much detail as we had. All the legal bullshit happened. There was a chain of custody for evidence, witness statements, and the civilians' identities. They put a photographer through the compound pics we'd taken, logged the cigarette butts and footprints, then it went out to investigators. Then the ambiguity started. We were told to limit conversations, to refer press queries to legal, to not post anything on personal comms. We were warned about operational security, about not jeopardizing people still in the field. A liaison came down and asked if any of us had any direct contact with the families of the prisoners. It read more like damage control than anything. An investigator did show up, and he did his thing quietly. After that, I had no fucking idea. I really wish I did. I hope those fuckers got a one-way ticket to hell. All I know is that this shit did not go public. I think they wanted everything done internally to avoid another edema situation. Because that's the fucking thing. The worst part is that I know this is not an isolated incident. This was definitely on the extreme side. These were some crazy fuckers to be shooting at us on sight. I don't know exactly their deal or what they were doing, but shit. I know for a fact that there were other guys out there, hiring soldiers out and torturing civilians out in these places, making them beg for mercy and making them admit to anything they could. I know a lot of them said they were doing it for glory, but they were sick fucks doing anything to get their kicks. They make the military look like a sham, just a place for pinheads to go when they can't get anywhere in life. It's an honor to serve your country, but these sick fucks used it to power trip and to feel in control, even though they ain't worth shit. Scum like them deserve to rot.